Hello, welcome to the Alone Show. I'm your host, John Milone. In this episode, I brought on regular Eric Taylor. As for our guest, he's from Spring, Texas. He's an author, blogger, accessibility advisor, singer, songwriter, digital media publicist, and host of What's Your Excuse? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Maxwell Ivy.
Well, thank you. How are you guys doing this evening?
Fabulously.
I can't complain. Life goes on, but yeah, I'm doing great.
Yeah, I have a friend at church. Whenever I ask him that, say that to him, he'll go, "I can't complain," and then he'll say, "Well, I could complain, but nobody would care."
I mean that's true. That's true. I could really complain, but who's really gonna care?
Yeah. So it was. I was enjoying our conversation before we got started, and it made me think that podcasters are really just like any other type of work. Even though many of us are doing this out of love rather than money. People that work in a steel mill after work, they talk about the people they work with. And podcasters, when we're not recording, half the time we're talking about podcasting.
Yeah, seems about like it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, blogging, podcasting, the hated social media stuff, complaining, you know.
Yeah. So Maxwell, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Even though, like John may just mentioned, some about you.
Right. Well, I am a almost totally blind son of carnival owners. I grew up in a family that operated a traveling carnival here in Texas. I was part of the family business until my dad passed away in 2003. Eventually, we went out of business, and I needed to do something else. I started helping people sell their used rides on the internet. In 2007, there wasn't any Facebook or LinkedIn or Wi-Fi or WordPress, so the first thing I had to do was teach myself how to code HTML, and then learn all the other things that go into having a business, like recruiting clients and setting fees. And eventually I started a blog and started doing interviews, and people were impressed by the work I did promoting the used rides and games, and they said, Max, we'd like to hear more about your life as a blind entrepreneur. So I started a second website as theblindblogger.net, which is a name people had been using as a sort of shorthand for me on LinkedIn and Facebook for a while before then. And since doing that, I share my experiences in my blog, books, and podcast. I report the life lessons that I've learned throughout my life as a result of the many challenges that I've been through. And I've published 4 books, 2 of them award winners. I've been on hundreds of podcasts. Eventually, I was talked into starting my own podcast called What's Your Excuse? And now I'm involved in 2 things pretty heavily, which is accessibility. I'm trying to help more people make their websites, blogs, and content more accessible so they can reach the huge market of people with disabilities, but also because by being more inclusive, people's content becomes better for everybody. And then the other thing is I'm trying to help other people with disabilities either start their own podcast or grow the audience of an existing podcast, which is one of the reasons why I was curious with y'all about the whole Anchor situation, because quite often the people I'm trying to work with don't have budgets, as I'm sure you probably know this. A lot of people don't. That people with physical disabilities, it's about 75% unemployment, and people with developmental or neurological disabilities, it's about 85% unemployment. So a lot of the people I'm trying to help get started, so maybe they can, have a business of their own through podcasting or blogging someday, don't have a lot of money to invest. So I was really happy to hear what y'all had to say about Anchor, and maybe this will be a way some of the people that I want to help will be able to get started where they are. And who knows, maybe as a result of our conversation today, me and you 2 guys will be responsible for the next, JLD or something.
Yeah. For the most part, Anchor's a really great platform to host your podcast on. It's really simple. I mean, you don't really have to pay for it. It's nothing. It's completely free. And I think it's been a great platform so far. I mean, you just simply need to have if you're going to do a solo podcast, you just need to have a laptop, or pretty much in general, you just need to have either a laptop or a phone to make your podcast on. Anchor, because Anchor is also a website you can record it on too, and yeah, it's just as simple as that. And yeah, it's just pretty easy nowadays.
Yeah. All right. Well, so y'all know a little bit more about me. How did you guys get together and start y'all's show?
Dominic,
Well,
take
I
it away.
think you mean that's okay. Yeah, you need to go way back into the year 2021.
I
Yeah.
love the way he said that. I want to know, why aren't you making a living as a voiceover artist?
I was actually thinking about doing some voiceovers once I finish university. I'm currently in my first year of my 3-year degree. Once I do finish university, I do actually want to go into voice work because I've been told by a lot of people you could do some voiceovers. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. I could do some voiceovers. And yeah, that's the rest is history.
Yeah,
Let's see.
I think it's just the accent. Like you have a great accent, and yeah, it's the way
But
you talk too.
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know. I
mean,
think he has a. I think he has an untapped flair for the dramatic, and not that I want to make his parents or his banker cringe, but I could see him being one of those people that during college decides to do voiceovers and then has to go back for their degree 20 years later because they just they were making too much money.
Well, yes, I suppose so.
that's true. So tell us about how you because I overheard you earlier saying you were almost blind. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that came to be.
Right. Well, I have retinitis pigmentosa or RP. It's a hereditary disease, so I had it at birth. I was born with perfect vision and had perfect vision or 20/20 until I was 5 or 6 years old, and then it started to decrease first gradually, and then when I entered junior high school, I had a big drop off in vision, which is pretty common for men with RP, and it stayed constant until I graduated from college. But by the time it stayed constant until I went off to college. But by the time I graduated, it was down to what it is now, which is very limited light perception, which is difficult for most people to understand. Even the doctors have trouble explaining it. So I usually just keep it simple and tell people that I'm totally blind. Although there are people in the vision loss community who get mad at me for saying it that way, but I like the simple and the honest wherever possible, and I just feel like that makes it clearer for most people. I grew up, I was lucky to grow up in an area where the schools had money to invest in actual special education teachers, orientation and mobility instructors, braille teachers, as opposed to most schools where the goal is just to avoid you causing problems until they no longer can get paid for you to be there. So I was very lucky in that respect. I also grew up in a family of people who did things. In the carnival world, there isn't a lot of time for feeling sorry for yourself. The most important thing you have to know about being a carnival owner is that all that matters is, can you make opening this week? And if you aren't open on Thursday or Friday, if people cannot buy a funnel cake or a cotton candy, if they can't at least try to win a teddy bear, then you failed. So you learn from an early age to basically figure out some way to get to next week. And I feel like that plus the fact that my vision loss was degenerative over time, I feel like I had a lot of training in my early years as far as finding unusual solutions and doing things I really didn't want to do if it meant solving the problem at the time, and really just staying positive and doing the next thing. Because, like I say, in my family, if you were feeling sorry for yourself, they put you to work.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And when my grandmother found things for us to do, they were never fun. They were things like wrapping the loose change so they could take it to the bank, or scrubbing the mud and dirt off of the canvas ballycloths, things like that. So I know we commented about people complaining earlier. Like I say, in my family, if you complained, you got more work.
Yeah, absolutely. So what have you been doing this week so far?
Well, let's see. I wrote a blog post for my website on how I managed to book our calendar of events back in the day using pretty much just a Perkins Braille writer and determination. I'm working on a blog post for a company called Audio Eye, which is an accessibility company that I subcontract to, on women that have had an impact on people with disabilities and accessibility. I record my podcast. I get my podcast out into the world where people can hear it. I do interviews like this one. Let's see, what else have I done this week? Even though it's Wednesday, which half the time yesterday seems like a long way away. Not a big thing, but as a lot of the e-commerce websites are not really friendly to screen reader users like me, I placed my Walmart grocery order this week. That was fun. You see, when there are things that you have, when it's something that you have trouble doing, you in the past have not been able to figure out how to do it. Even if it's something you don't enjoy doing it, the feeling of accomplishment that you managed to do it and you managed to give them your money and have stuff come to your house, that, while it may not seem like a big deal, stuff like that, is important. And myself and lots of other people talk about finding those small wins and celebrating them. So those are some of the things I've done this week. I maintain my social media accounts, which, as you guys know, is a lot of work. I'm trying to think, what else have I done? I've had a few conversations with some good friends. I've had some meetings for the writing that I have to be doing. And I also got a nice email from a woman who interviewed somebody for her podcast that I introduced to them. And, they sent me the podcast episode so I could listen to it. And it was really cool. At the end of the episode, they gave a shout out for my podcast network, the WYE network, where I'm trying to help other people start podcasts. So those are some things that I did or that happened this week.
Okay. Fabulous. Way, let's go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great to hear. And hold on, I actually got some questions.
Why is he laughing? He had sort of an evil laugh there just a minute ago, man.
Who Jame?
Yeah, it's kind of like an evil chuckle. Not really. Yeah, there you go. Like.
Yes.
Okay,
it's,
so like
cartoon voices from my youth, man.
Yeah.
All right, so have you ever had a job that you hated? If so, and why?
Oh yeah, I had one I hated with a passion. When I graduated from college in 1990, my original goal was to go to law school, but my admissions exams weren't good enough, so none of the schools in Texas would take me. And so I got admitted to a program in Little Rock, Arkansas, to be trained to go to work for the Internal Revenue Service, which, for you guys, would be the agency that collects the value-added tax in your country. They're not nice people, and most of the people that work there weren't nice people. So in the U.S., when people owe taxes, they send them out this letter, and this letter has all the vile, nasty things the government can do to them if they don't behave. Well, guess who was the guy answering the phone when those people would get that letter? Yeah, that was me. So after about 2.5 years of that, it got to the point where at that time I was walking to work, and halfway from my apartment to the office building, there was a chicken restaurant that was open for breakfast. And this was obviously before cell phones. When it got to the point that every day I passed that restaurant, I had to talk myself out of going into the payphone and calling in and telling them I ain't coming, that's when I knew it was time to quit. And I decided that my personal well-being was more valuable than the check they were writing me, even if it did mean quitting in the middle of winter. So I said, it ain't like I'm getting rich here, and if I'm going to be living from check to check, from week to week, I think I could do that at home where I enjoy myself a little more. So I went back to the family and started participating in our carnival again. And there are only 3 things that I regretted about leaving that job. One, I left in the winter. in the carnival business at that time, and for a lot of smaller businesses, it's still seasonal. So leaving in the winter meant I went home to people who didn't have a lot of money coming in. So I wish I had waited till the spring to quit. The other thing is, I didn't know this, but when you work a job where they give you time off for vacation and health benefits, if you don't take those before you quit, you lose them. So I wish I'd have known to take my vacation and sick days before I quit. And then finally, when I quit, I had good credit. Since I left and went and became part of the carnival, my credit was got worse and worse because our income was not what you'd call reliable or predictable. So sometimes you just couldn't pay people. And my dad used to laugh when somebody would ask him if he wanted to file for a loan. He would say, my credit's so bad they won't let me borrow library books. So the third thing, like I say, I had good credit at the time. I wish I had taken my credit and went and bought some sort of a nice, relatively new ride or game before I quit working for the IRS. But I got to the point where I hated the job, where once a week I'd go find somewhere where people couldn't see me and cry. And I was like, these people need to be more honest with the students going through this program and let them know that you're probably going to do this one job for years before they promote you or train you for something else, and it's not fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's very true. And let me check on that.
And I think it's interesting. We now, when I quit that job in 1993, people didn't quit jobs just because they hated them. So it's really kind of interesting to be living in a time now where people, if they don't feel like their well-being is being addressed, they just won't go. Or if they can't quit, they'll just show up and do the bare minimum. So it's really interesting to see how things have changed to where it is now socially acceptable to just say, I'm sorry, I ain't working here no more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. It's very socially acceptable to just say I'm not working here anymore. And on top of that, most people can't even work an 8-hour shift because of stuff. But at the end of the day, that job doesn't owe you anything. It's an 8 hours.
That is so true. That is so true. Very few jobs that are advertised as 8 hours are really 8 hours anymore because they expect to be able to email you, call you, text you, have you respond to social media posts. They just want more and more and more of your time. And, I would have thought with COVID and with the number of people that have quit over the last few years that more companies would have realized that the boundaries are being set, even if they're being set by people walking away and try to do something about them. But you are so right, man. Very few, even jobs that are only, say, 4 or 5 hours a day, that doesn't mean they aren't going to try to get you to work longer or take on additional work.
Exactly. So, so my next question to you is, if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you want to go to and why?
Well, travel, really, I would. I'm open to going just about anywhere. I've been to quite a few places on the East Coast. I haven't been to very many places on the West Coast. I would love to do Hawaii and Alaska. One of the things that I kind of kick around with my brother from time to time is if I were going to relocate, take advantage of the fact that I can work anywhere, where would I want to live? Which I think is a question I have a better answer to. And this answer may not be the way you would answer the question, but this is the way I answered it. Okay, so if I were going to move somewhere and live there, my number one choice would be Australia because they have 4 seasons. They have a very high level of support for people with disabilities, and they've got relatively good television. They've also got pretty good mass transit. My second choice would be the UK. They have worse weather, but they've got better television. As far as described television for visually impaired viewers, so that we can follow along with what's going on the screen. The UK has better transit, worse weather, even though a lot of their transit, from what I've been told by the visually impaired people, it's not unusual for you to have to step wide, jump, or even leap because the the gates don't match up with the cars when they come to certain stations. But those are my top two places I would love to live if I were going to relocate. And I've actually thought about it. My third choice would be Canada. I like their health care. They have access to the U.S. TV shows, and in Canada they can't charge you for your cable. The weather's horrible most of the year by my standards because I'm from Texas. But the transit is pretty good in the cities, although navigating from one part of the country to another is not so easy. So I generally tend to make my decisions based on if everything else is equal, then I'm going to go with where is the most accessible option. Where am I going to get the most assistance, either from other people I know that live there, or from government agencies, or from nonprofits? So, quite a few of my software choices are not necessarily the biggest names, but they're companies that have made their products accessible for me, so I don't have to spend a bunch of extra time using them. I don't have to scratch my head trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this again? Because they made things too complicated. I'm a big fan of Mad Mimi for my autoresponder, simply because of the very high level of customer service, to the point that they will even create my mass emails for me if I just send them an email and say, this is what I want the email to say, and this is who I want you to send it to. So those are a little bit of insight into how I make my choices. But if I to travel pretty much anywhere, relocate would be Australia, UK, and Canada.
Well, I can't argue with those options. They seem really good.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for Dominic?
Yes. In a world filled with bananas, how would you react if these bananas came crashing down like it was raining?
That would depend on whether the bananas were ripe or still green. Because if they were still green, they would crush your ass. But if they were ripe, they would smush on contact. So, you might be able to survive a avalanche of ripe or overripe bananas.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sure I don't think that was where he expected me to go with that question.
No, I'm just going with the flow, like I always do.
Yeah, with questions like that, I have to thank my good friend Brian the Hammer Jackson, who I had my very first interview with online in 2013, and I was a regular guest on his show for about 6 months, and he was kind of like you. You never knew what he was going to ask you from one Friday to the next. So I feel like he trained me very well for the unusual question.
That makes a lot of sense.
That plus I've done hundreds of interviews, so a lot of these questions I've answered so many times I don't. But it's funny. I hear these celebrities like the rock stars and the movie actors, and they say they get tired of some of these questions because it's always the same question every time. But even though I've done hundreds of interviews, and I'm not saying that to brag, I'm just saying it to let you know that I've been doing this a long time, I don't ever feel like the question is boring or aggravating or tedious. I mean, 10 years later, there are still people ask me, how does a blind guy even have a blog or a podcast? And it's just, to me, it's like, hey, it's an opportunity to answer the question for somebody who's never heard my answer before.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, I guess it does sound great.
I mean, that's the thing. No matter how famous you are, you're not going to reach every person in the world or even every person in the room. So, when you get asked that question just remind yourself, this person hasn't heard my answer yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just curious now. What are you guys studying for, and what are y'all's career goals as you see them today?
You want to go first, John May?
Yeah, I suppose so. So right now, I'm currently at Manchester Metropolitan University studying drama and contemporary performance. And my goals for once I graduate was, well, first off, do some voice work. Secondly, do some acting for television. And thirdly, with whatever the money the government gives me, I hope to invest that so I can create some passive income once I do graduate, so I can pay off my student loans, so I don't have to think about it. And so yeah, that's about it.
I like that plan. I like that. That's very creative. Okay, that's good. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, what was the question again?
What are you currently studying, and where are you planning on going with it at this moment, knowing that the one thing we've all learned in the last 5 years is everything can change tomorrow.
Hmm. Well, I'm currently not studying anything because I'm not in school yet, at
Okay.
least, or at all. Still deciding. Also, well, for now, I'm just really trying to work and make some and earn some money so I can start investing and earn some passive income and
Gotcha.
maybe do some other stuff on the side so I can earn some passive income. And well, but what I really want to do is well, do podcasting and the like my I can't really I can't really tell you what I really want to do because it's like it just sometimes it changes, but I'm just gonna say this. I No, I'm not gonna say. Yeah, no, because my goals do change at times, but it's like ultimately, yeah, I know what I want to do. I just really don't want to tell people
Okay. All
for the
right.
most
Well,
part.
yeah. So just keep working on documenting your lived experience. Use your podcast so people know what kind of work you're doing, and really be open to seeing what kind of skills the current work is developing in you. I didn't used to think people would even care about the work I did back in my life in the carnival business, but I've had several people who have listened to the many things I had to do, like booking events and ordering stock and hiring staff, and you know, just a lot of things that went into what I had to do back in those days. And they're like, you may not have the classic resume skills, but you have what we would call a PhD in lived experiences. So I I totally totally cool. I think whatever you can do to get you closer to your goal is the thing you need to be doing. And I think that's another thing we've all learned is there is no one absolute guaranteed path to get to there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about student loan debt. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I mean, if I do go to school, I'm gonna somehow try to find a way to not take out a loan, so I can I'm gonna find a loophole around that. Like I don't know, probably apply for financial aid or get or try and get like a scholarship or something like that.
well, and in the short term, one thing you can look into is a lot of companies are offering educational support even to part-time employees. So it could be that one of the places you're working would at least partially finance some of your studies while you're working for them.
Hmm.
Like for example, my brother works nights stocking shelves at Walmart, and Walmart will fund any of their employees, including their part-time employees, after they've been there a certain length of time. And as long as they're studying business, finance, marketing, or something where when that person eventually gets their degree, they feel like they might be of some use to Walmart down the road. So uh, it may be that you're working for somebody who either has a plan where they invest in education, or something I'm known for is just because it ain't there doesn't mean it can't be there. So I like to say, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. So it may be that somebody you're working for right now might be willing to invest in your college education. Might be this conversation you want to have with them. You know, maybe try to keep it casual, like a meal or coffee or something, and see if you can start a conversation about your current employers investing in your education.
I'll be honest. I never really thought about working while in school. I would personally, I would just like to focus on one thing because personally, I
Yeah,
would just like to focus on one thing. It's either work or school. So if I'm in school, I mean, if I have to work while I'm in school, I'll do it. But it's like ultimately, I don't really want that. I wouldn't want that to be the case
yeah.
for the most part because I would just want to focus on one thing.
All righty. Any more
But
questions?
no, you, John May?
No, that's all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Maxwell. talking about your life as a blind blogger and well, a lot of other things. So much to keep up with. It's been incredible.
Well, thank you, fellas. I really do appreciate it. As I like to make sure I tell this whenever I get to have a conversation like this. Without podcasting and having these conversations, I would never have had the opportunity to share my experiences with so many people. So without guys like you, there wouldn't be a blind blogger. There wouldn't be a What's Your Excuse. So I just want to thank you for your part in my continuing journey and my continuing story.
Anytime.
Anytime.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And until next time, stay tuned for more.